Sometimes, in my darker moments, I think about how much of my personal information is held by various giants of the big data industry. Not only the fact that that information is processed and used to exploit my various wants and needs for profit, but also that that information can be stolen for further processing and exploitation. Big data's methods of collection, interpretation, and storage are to a degree opaque, kept as trade secrets, and wide open to individuals and organizations with the skill and the will to take it. Perhaps more immediately, I work closely with edgy goth-adjacent superhero Whisper, someone who can read my thoughts anytime she wants. The occupational hazard for me there is mostly just a matter of personal embarrassment. But not everyone is my friend, and not everyone uses their powers for good. What if a mind reader decides they aren't bound by the same personal or ethical constraints embraced by someone like Whisper? What moral, ethical, and legal responsibilities apply to those among us who can read the thoughts of others? Part 1. The Power Dynamic. Speaking as someone with no demonstrable telepathic abilities, it's easy to fear and resent those who have this frightening ability, regardless of how, or even if, they use it. The relationship between mind readers and the rest of us is, in this regard at least, very one-sided. And, like other asymmetrical power dynamics, such as those between regular individuals and big data or law enforcement agencies or superheroes, it can make the relatively powerless feel as though no thought or decision is really simply their own. It's impossible to know how long telepathy has been around. Regardless, the genie is out of the bottle, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and your thoughts are on open display to whomever can read them. There's no conscionable way to remove it from our reality because that would mean removing those people from our reality, or at least permanently altering their central nervous systems for our own benefit, which is, for us, functionally the same, and that would be, to say the least, a crime. And besides, it takes for granted the idea that mind readers will definitely use those powers against us. That's no more true than the idea that a gifted fighter will definitely punch you in the face for no reason. And for the most part, we don't go around just cutting people's hands off for that anyway. So here we are, stuck wrestling with the moral and legal implications of using telepathy to read the thoughts of others. Oh, and content warning, I'm going to talk about cops and invasion of privacy. I mean, obviously. Part 2. Nothing to hide. Imagine for a moment that you're a telepath working in the field of law enforcement. Legally, there's very little preventing you from reading the thoughts of everyone you encounter and using those readings as investigative leads. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about, right? Well, this assumes a lot. First, we're assuming that you're devoid of any kind of prejudice. And sorry if you weren't aware, but that's not possible. By reading someone's thoughts, your personal experiences and intentions change the meaning of any thoughts you read. They become your experience of someone else's thoughts. Unless you can absorb the totality of another person's life and identity, which would make mere mind reading look pedestrian by comparison, you are going to impose your own meaning over top of it. Second, and this might be controversial, nobody has nothing to hide. I'm sure there are people who can live their whole life without ever breaking a single law, but adherence to legalism doesn't and can't define the boundaries of your right to privacy. A person may live their life crime-free in a legal sense, but from sexual orientation to their favorite breakfast, there are endless other aspects of a person's thoughts that they might want to keep secret for reasons that aren't anyone's business. Third, a lot of those private thoughts may not connect to any legal consequences, but that doesn't mean you can't leverage information gleaned from another mind to, say, blackmail a closeted queer person or sabotage their career for selfish reasons. And it's pretty clear to everyone that just because you're in law enforcement doesn't mean you're incapable of selfish, violent, or otherwise antisocial behavior. Whether or not it's legal for agents of law enforcement to read minds, mass surveillance of civilians by police isn't just immoral on its own, but leaves a window wide open for criminal cops to exploit that information. Which leads us to the other problem. Part 3. Centralized for thieves. Imagine for a moment that you've given Whisper your consent for her to read your mind. What does that even mean? Can she just root around anywhere in your head? Is she capable of narrowing her focus? Is her own mind safe from other mind readers? Have you also considered that someone less trustworthy, like, I don't know, Crucifer, might read her mind? And have you therefore given Crucifer your consent for indirect access to the content of your thoughts? Legally, you have not, and Whisper is actually under no legal obligation here anyway, but she does have a moral obligation to guard your information, and I believe an ethical responsibility to be extremely judicious in her use of mind reading for this exact reason. Just collecting people's thoughts en masse means that this intensely private information is now centralized, and as such leaves everyone extremely vulnerable to concentrated mental attacks and possible psyops by Crucifer, or some other telepath who might be fairly described as antisocial or even malevolent. Of course, very little of this matters in a practical sense. Telepathic crime is, at this point, impossible to disprove and therefore impossible to prosecute. For the time being, we just have to live with the knowledge that Crucifer can gather all the information he deems useful from as many minds as he has the capacity for. We will have no idea until he uses it against us. We will have no recourse of any kind beyond violent resistance. And for most of us, this is easily recognized as the futile gesture it is. So without an intense ideological conviction to the contrary, we tend to lose interest. We allow it to be normalized because that's what human minds do in the face of something we can't understand or functionally oppose. So yeah, that's kind of depressing. And I don't know what else to say about it. Stay positive, I guess. Ugh. On a personal and tangentially related note, I just want to add that reading a friend or romantic partner's mind will, without exception, permanently change your relationship with them, and that person will notice it. So maybe don't read people's minds without their consent. So is it a crime to read minds? As far as I can tell, the answer is, it depends. Obtaining informed consent, as discussed, is paramount, as is taking measures to make sure your own psychic defenses are up to the task of keeping the thoughts you read secure. Thanks to Whisper for helping me write this episode. She obviously has an insight and knows the topic in a way most of us can't. Shout out to Crucifer for being a good repository for all our negative energy. God knows we all need that. Thanks to my patrons, without whom this would still technically be possible, but it would be a lot harder. If you would like to join them, the link to my Patreon and Ko-fi are in the description. If you are moved to like and subscribe, that would make me happy. Other social media things are also listed below. And as always, thank you for listening. This is the Silver Samaritan saying good luck and stay safe.